Hey there, woodworkers. Today I'll be turning a baseball bat on the lathe, one like this. If you want to turn a bat on the lathe, you'll need to start off with some material. Common material for baseball bat blanks is hard maple or ash. You'll also need some turning tools. So here I've got my spindle roughing gouge, just a regular spindle gouge, a parting tool, a skew, and also I'm using a carbide insert rougher. Before you get it on the lathe and start using your tools, you're going to need to set up your blank. So I've got a center finder and a little center punch to help me with that. You'll also need a set of calipers, and then you'll use these calipers to apply your pattern to the lathe. So you can either do that by measuring an existing bat that you already have, or you can work from a set of plans like these that have the dimensions laid out for you. So once you have your center points found, then you can put your baseball bat blank on the lathe and start turning. Okay, here I am at the lathe. And to save time on this video, I have already roughed this down to a cylinder, and I've taken this down to 2 5/8, and I've used my calipers, and I set these to my 2 5/8, and I was able to use that to help me get that dimension consistently all the way across. So that's the idea, is we are going to have certain diameters at certain spots, and we'll use our calipers to make sure to transfer those measurements and make sure that we get those diameters in the right spot. Once we have those critical diameters in the right spot, then it's almost like a dot to dot, just connecting those spots to get the shape of our bat. So I'm going to be turning with the handle of the bat down here and with the head of the bat up here. So once you have it down to a cylinder, now we need to do some measuring and marking where we're going to have those critical diameters. So I'm going to be following this pattern that I printed. This is from Penn State Industries Woodworking Products, and they've given me a nice little diagram, and some measurements of where I want to mark those. But you can also do the same type of thing with an existing bat. If you just, measure the length and then measure the diameter at that point, then you can transfer those dimensions to the bat that you're making as well. So I'm going to start off by marking off the ends of the bat. I'm going to do a 33-inch bat. So, and I think this is a 35-inch blank. So I'm going to put a mark about 1 inch on that end and 1 inch from this end. You want to leave yourself about 1 inch extra on the ends so that you don't get those center point marks in your bat. And then from there, my pattern is telling me to mark every 3 inches up the entire bat. So I'm just going to use my ruler and just transfer a mark every 3 inches. And it's also has a mark for the knob at the end, and that one is 3/4 of an inch away from the end of the bat. So I'm going to mark that as well. Now I'm going to transfer these lines so that they go all the way around. I'm just going to make them a little darker. As long as you're careful, you can use a pencil just like a tool and transfer those lines. Okay, now just to make it easier on myself, I'm actually going to write in on each of these spots, I'm going to write in what the diameter is supposed to be for those. Okay, so now we're basically ready to get started. I'm going to just take a little bit off these ends to get them out of the way, and then I'm just going to start systematically working. I've got my RPMs. You may want to have a little bit slower when you're roughing, but I'll probably have this up at about 1800 or so RPMs. Okay, so I've taken these ends down, but I haven't taken them super far. I think I've left them at about 1.25 inches, maybe 1.5 inches. You still want plenty of strength there, but you just want those out of the way so you can start working. Okay, so now I'm going to start parting in, and I'm going to start with the largest diameters and work my way over. So this is telling me that my diameter here and here should be 2.5. So I'll take my calipers and my ruler, and I'm going to match them up at 2.5, or I might just leave it just a hair over 2.5 so that I can do a nice clean cut at the end and do some sanding. So I may take it to more like 2 9/16. Then I'll just change that mark to match each of these, and I'll work my way down. My next diameter is 2 3/8. Okay, then 2 1/8. Okay, you can see that I'm carefully using my parting tool and my caliper at the same time. If you do that, do be careful, or if you're more comfortable, you can caliper and then tool individually if that feels more comfortable. Okay, my next mark is 1 3/4. Okay, then 1 1/4. You'll notice that the deeper that you part, when you go to use your caliper, it might have a hard time. So sometimes I'll just widen that part just a little bit to make room for the tool. Okay, my next diameter is 1 1/16, 1, and then it starts to widen again down here. I think that I'm going to just take these down to 1 1/4 for now, and then I'll take them to their final diameter a little later after I remove some of this material. You'll also notice as you're turning that the closer to the center you get of the bat, there is a little bit of vibration as it's spinning. So you may have to take those cuts pretty light so that you don't split your bat on the lathe, okay? You'll feel the vibration as you're turning because there is some flexibility here. So just be careful of that. Okay, so I've left these diameters plenty big. I think I'm going to start removing material down here. So the idea now is just to use those diameters, like we talked about it being kind of a dot to dot. And so you can sort of visually envision what that bat is supposed to look like based on those diameters. So for this first part, I'm going to be switching over to my spindle roughing gouge. I prefer to do a lot of my work with the spindle roughing gouge, but just to show you another option, I'm going to use my carbide scraper for a minute. So this is another great option as well. Just remember, when you're using a scraper, your tool should be level. When you're using a gouge, then your tool angle is typically dropped down a little lower. So I'm actually even going to lower my tool rest just a hair to match this tool. I'm going to go back to my roughing gouge. Now that I've removed some material, I am going to very carefully part in a little closer to where these diameters are supposed to be. You may be able to see or hear it, but there is quite a bit of vibration in here. So just again, remember, if you feel that piece vibrating, then you need to make your cut much lighter so that we don't split that bat. Okay, and the knob, this is telling me the knob is about 2 inches. Okay, I'll have to do a little bit more work with my caliper down here, but other than that, you can kind of see by looking at the parted in sections that we're kind of getting our baseball bat shape. So now I'm going back to just removing material. Okay, I've done a lot of work with my spindle roughing gouge, but again, just to show the difference, I'm going to switch over to my carbide rougher again. All right, we're getting closer. I'm going to deal with the knob down here now. So we've parted into 2 inches. So I'm going to take this down to that 2 inches, and then I'll part in next to it to get my final diameter for the base of the handle. Okay, it doesn't give me a measurement for the base of the handle, but it shows us that the knob is 2 inches and the handle here is 1 1/8. I think that I want my knob to be about 1/4 inch, sticking out about 1/4 inch. So I think that I'll take this area down to 1 3/4. I'm going back to my spindle roughing gouge. Okay, we're getting pretty close to our final form. Keep in mind that you can do a whole lot of work with sandpaper as well, but these last few cuts I'm just going to try to take very lightly. I think that I'm going to switch over and start using my skew and use it similar to a carbide scraper. I'm going to use this as a scraper to kind of clean up some of these cuts. I'm going to take that transition just a little deeper. At this point, I'm kind of feeling along and just making sure it feels comfortable. If you notice a high spot, you can either just kind of visually make a mental note that you need to take that down, or you can also, if you put some marks, and then you know that once those marks are gone, then you've turned out that spot you wanted to. Okay, now I'm going to round off the end and round off the knob here. For that, I'm going to use a spindle gouge, but you could also use the round carbide tool or the detail tool. It's up to you. Okay, at this point I'm pretty close on my form, so I think I'm going to switch over to some sandpaper. I may come back to some of my tools, but sometimes it's nice just to see how it's sanding out, and a lot of times that reveals a few problems or things that you need to clean up. So let me go grab my sandpaper. Make sure when you are sanding, make sure to remove the tool rest. And I probably could have gone a little more careful and got some cleaner cuts, but that's okay. So I'm going to start off with some 80 grit and just try to smooth out some of the unevenness in some of my turning. Okay, and if I notice any high spots, then I'm just going to mark those. You get a high spot like that, you can either go back to your tools or you can just kind of have a spot that you know that you need to sand out a little extra. So I'm going to try sanding this out. Okay, that took quite a bit of work with my 80 grit, but it is down to the point where I feel my form is what I want. And so now I'm going to start progressing through my next grits. I'll go 100, 150, 220, and I'll probably, for a bat like this, I'll probably take this up to 220 or 320 as far as sanding goes. I'll sand it a little bit more, and then at some point we will cut off a little bit closer on our ends once we get to the point where we're about ready to take the bat off the lathe. Okay, I think I'm ready for my 150. some 180. $220. Okay, now that I've sanded as much as I would like to, I'm going to come back and turn these ends down a little closer so that I can sand a little bit more of the top and bottom. Okay, I've taken those ends down to about a 1/2 inch or so. I'm just going to touch up the top and bottom with some sandpaper now. Okay, so my bat is basically done turning and sanding. If you want to leave your bat looking natural, then you can move straight on to taking it off the lathe and removing the ends. But another thing that can look nice is if you do add some color or some dye to the bat as well. So I'm going to add a little bit of dye to the handle of this bat. Okay, I just gave it a nice air dusting. You want it to be nice and clean when you add some dye. I'm using an alcohol-based dye, and all you need is just a clean finishing rag or a clean cloth to apply this, and we're going to apply it while it's spinning on the lathe. I am going to turn my RPMs down, probably just under 1,000. And you also kind of want to have in mind if you want to do the whole thing or if you want to do the top or the bottom. I think that I'm going to do mine about halfway, and we'll see what it looks like. Okay, and perhaps I should have put some gloves on before adding to this, but it's looking pretty good. I think just to help this be more of a crisp transition, I think that I'm going to add just a little bit of black Sharpie right where it transitions there. If there's a few spots that need to be touched up, you can also do that with the lathe off. I noticed there's just a little bit of this grain that didn't quite soak in. This die can be applied while it's not spinning, but it just makes it so easy and nice to do it while it is spinning. Okay, that's looking about how I would like to. And so I'm gonna go wash my hands, and then I'm gonna come get this off the lathe. Okay, when it's ready to come off the lathe, we just need to cut off these ends. So you could carefully do that with the bandsaw, or you could also just use a handsaw. So I think I'm just gonna use the handsaw. What I'm gonna do though is I'm not gonna cut right on my top or bottom. I'm going to leave a little bit of that excess, and then I'm gonna sand the rest of that off. So I wanna cut close to, but not quite on my actual piece. Okay, and to do this, I'm actually gonna use my locking pin so that my bat doesn't turn. Okay, so my bat doesn't turn while I'm cutting it off. Okay, that's going to be close enough over there. Oh, got bound a little bit on that side too. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just carefully rotate this to the other side and finish it off over here. Okay, now on this end, I probably could just break it off, but I do want to try and sand that off, or saw that off, excuse me. So that I don't get any tear out that then I wouldn't be able to sand out. Okay, so it's looking pretty good. The only things I have left are to finish sanding the top and bottom, and I'm gonna put some lacquer on this. Okay, I've sanded down the ends so that those are nice and flush and feel good. You can see I've sanded through some of my green dye, so I'm gonna air dust this off and add just a little bit of dye at the bottom. Okay, I've air dusted that off, and now I'm just gonna apply a little bit more dye to the bottom. Okay, and there we have it. Now we are ready to apply some finish. There's several different types of finish you can use, but I'm going to use a spray lacquer on this bat. I'll probably do 2 coats of lacquer. Okay, so here goes our first coat of lacquer. Okay, that's looking pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and leave that first coat to dry, and then we'll come and flip it over. All right, so after a couple coats of lacquer, our bat's feeling really good. It's looking really good. This is a really fun project to do, and now you're ready to go to batting practice.